I think there's a lot of hope in reimagining this world. Not because words alone or books alone change anything, but rather that because of the way we think of things, we can be inspired to action and to aspire to collective, union-based action. I think that's a deep hope of mine for Southeast Asia, and perhaps as an extension for this book as well. So my story is a retelling of Malaysian history through magic realism. It's the idea that the magic or the strange or the fantastic sometimes pops into the real world in unexplained ways, and we as writers or Malaysians or experiencers of life are forced to deal with it. My two characters are Lydia and Gabriel, two middle-class Malaysians who find themselves caught up in events that they cannot explain, dealing with a Malaysian history that they never had to deal with firsthand. On one hand, they're caught up with the history of the Malaysian communist emergency in the 1950s, while dealing with that in around 2018, just around the turns of the elections when we had elected a new government for the first time. They are forced to deal with the fact that their ancestors and the prophets and saints and local spirits of the Chinese and Muslim and Hindu traditions of Malaysia are a lot more weird and unpleasant, and perhaps more hopeful figures than we'd ever imagined. I think in the past 4 years, I found myself reading a lot of Malaysian fiction from a lot of different periods. So it includes the Malay Hikayat tradition and Malaysian writers from the past 2 centuries, engaging with Malaysian history, but also with Malaysian nostalgia. I found myself deeply inspired, but also challenged by the ways nostalgia is dealt with in Malaysia, both for the urban wealthy Peranakan experience or the British colonial experience, and that we look back to it with some rosy eyes sometimes. I think one of the things that I found myself reevaluating very often was the ways that the texts themselves sound very different from this lionized golden age nostalgia that we had for them. While I think a lot of people think of our national epics like Hikayat Hang Tuah with a very negative light, especially in urban or English-speaking zones of Malaysia, it seems that the Hikayat traditions speak to a very different kind of Malayan or Malaysian identity that perhaps could translate well to 2018. One of the key figures of Hikayat Hang Tuah, of course, is Nabi Khidir, and he's this prophet who wears nothing but green robes and travels across the Indian Ocean from king to king and country to country. And he's always trying to make peace and to reconcile people with each other, not to spread a language of empire or supremacy. And that struck me as really interesting. And that was very much the root of what my story was about. I think one of the things I would like to see is that the novel finds a way into the hands of Malaysian writers and readers. And I'd be interested in the ways that perhaps it might ask Malaysians to reevaluate what they think of as Malaysian, or what counts as Malaysia. I don't expect that to happen all at once, and I don't expect anyone to necessarily agree with my very narrow take on what Malaysia might be or can be. But I hope that this inspires people to write back or to respond to each other about this, to think about these rebel Malaysians and rebel Malaysias that have always existed, and perhaps on a larger scale in Southeast Asia, that Southeast Asians reevaluate these borders and kingdoms and nationalities that we've been assigned.